Lesson study is a form of professional development that has been used in Japan for over 100 years. As lesson study has gained in popularity worldwide since the early 2000s, various adaptations have been made to it, both as a result of aspects being lost in translation, but also due to necessity, resulting from different cultural and professional practices in different countries. This brief overview will aim to give those who are new to lesson study an introduction to what lesson study is, what might constitute a planning team, an overview of a lesson study cycle using the collaborative lesson research model, and we'll conclude with a final explanation about what lesson study is not. The purpose of lesson study is to gain new knowledge for teaching and learning, with the aim of ultimately improving outcomes for pupils. It's perhaps most commonly associated with the teaching and learning of mathematics, but it is used in other subject areas as well. In 2016, Takahashi and McDougall published a paper introducing the term collaborative lesson research that outlined the structures and practices important for maximising the impact of lesson study outside of Japan. We'll take each aspect of the cycle and explore what it involves, and also look at how this has been interpreted in schools in Highland that have been using collaborative lesson research. Planning teams typically consist of approximately 3 to 5 teachers. These planning teams can take different forms, and regardless of whether you have several planning teams within an individual larger school or made up from joining several smaller schools together, teams might either be organised by stage. For example, you might have a lower stage, a middle stage and an upper stage team. Or you might choose to have a team that has a mix of teachers from all levels. Both models have advantages and disadvantages. The process starts by identifying a school-wide research theme, which will be addressed over a 2 to 3 year period. In some schools in Highland, we used the 4 capacities, which are at the heart of Scotland's Curriculum for Excellence, to help us consider where we would ideally like our pupils to be and where they are now. To support this, we used a combination of teacher judgment, pupil questionnaires and assessment data, including formative assessments, Scottish National Standardised Assessment data, and data from diagnostic assessments. The school-wide research theme is typically quite broad and not necessarily subject-specific. It's useful to include a desired outcome for pupils and an entry point for achieving that outcome. This is an example from a school in Highland. Enabling pupils to become effective contributors who can share their thought processes with others and use their own and others' ideas to solve problems and apply their thinking. This will be developed through the use of discussion stems, pupil reflections, concrete materials, and visual representations. The next stage is to choose a topic that you want to investigate. This is typically something that is causing an issue in relation to teaching and learning. Perhaps teachers are finding it hard to teach, or pupils are finding it hard to learn. As for the school-wide research theme, you can use a range of data in your school to help you decide on a suitable topic. An example might be understanding remainders in division, including interpreting these in the context of a problem, or understanding how to calculate the area of a particular shape. In Highland, where a whole school is using lesson study and time for meetings is set aside as part of the working time agreement, all planning teams in the school will typically work on the same topic as part of their cycle. For example, division, but address this in different ways depending on the year group that has been chosen for the research lesson. The planning teams can come together at the end of the cycle and share their learning to support the development of a consistent whole school approach. The topic area is typically explored through one lesson study cycle. A unit of lessons might be planned, for example a sequence of 6 lessons, and one of the lessons will be planned in greater detail. This will be the research lesson. During the planning stages, each team engages in what is known in Japan as kyosai kyenkyu, which literally translates to the study or research of materials for teaching. This phase supports understanding of subject progression, subject knowledge, and pedagogical content knowledge, and might include an analysis of curriculum documents, including comparing and contrasting documents, reading and discussion of relevant research papers, an analysis of a range of tasks and discussion about the impact on pupil learning. The next part of the planning stage is to use the knowledge gained from the materials that were studied and develop a research proposal. The research proposal includes what the planning team learnt from their research, a brief plan for the broader unit of lessons, a detailed lesson plan for the research lesson, and a rationale for the lesson and task design choices that were made by the team, including the choice of task, number ranges, and materials, among other things. A knowledgeable other, who is someone that is experienced in both lesson study and the curriculum area that the team have chosen to investigate, may be used to support the planning team at this stage. They may provide suggestions for research to look at relevant to the research theme and research topic. They might read and provide feedback on the team's research proposal. The team can then use this to make amendments prior to the research lesson. In schools in Highland that have used collaborative lesson research, this planning phase might typically consist of 4 to 5 90-minute staff meetings. While not set in stone, some teams have found the following format useful. The first meeting involves kyuzai kenkyu, where teachers read, discuss and analyse a variety of teaching materials. The second meeting might involve continuing to study those curriculum materials and start to use those materials to formulate a unit plan. The third meeting might involve using what they've learnt so far to write the detailed lesson plan for the research lesson. And the fourth meeting might be used to conduct a mock lesson and finalise the research lesson plan and research proposal. A fifth planning meeting might be useful if the team are finding they have a lot to discuss, or perhaps the unit is particularly long or particularly challenging. The research lesson is taught by one member of the planning team and observed by the other members. In Highland, in larger schools or schools where the geography is not problematic, the research lesson can be live and other teachers attend the lesson in person. Due to the small and often remote nature of some of Highland's schools, it may not be practical to observe the lesson in person. If this is the case, a recording of the lesson is made and other teachers watch this asynchronously before the post-lesson discussion. Depending on how lesson study is being used in the school and the capacity to release other teachers, observers who are not part of the planning team may also be invited to watch the lesson to help the team address the challenges that they were trying to overcome. This may include inviting teachers from other schools. When observing the research lesson, it's important to keep the following points in mind with respect to the purpose and ethos of lesson study. The lesson plan was co-constructed by the team, not the individual teacher teaching the lesson. The focus is on pupil learning, not the teacher. And the plan is not supposed to represent a model lesson or a perfect plan, but a way to address and reflect on an identified issue. The planning team identify points of evaluation that they want observers to look for and help them evaluate. The observers gather data in the form of observations about what pupils said and did throughout the lesson. These observations then form the basis for the post-lesson discussion. The lesson shouldn't be used as a performance management observation. This would undermine the purpose of lesson study. It's expected that anyone who observed the research lesson will also attend the post-lesson discussion in order to reflect on the lesson by sharing their observations and help the planning team address their points of evaluation. The planning team and other observers use the data they've gathered to reflect on the pupil learning from the lesson by addressing the points of evaluation set out by the planning team. This should also link back to the school-wide research theme. It's important for observers to learn to keep their observations and comments grounded in factual and specific information. For example, what pupils said and did, rather than generic sweeping statements such as "that was a nice lesson" or "the pupils seemed to enjoy it." These statements don't really achieve much. Keeping in mind that the purpose of lesson study is to gain new knowledge for teaching and learning, lesson study requires a safe space where trusting relationships can develop so that strengths, issues, and challenges can be discussed in a meaningful and purposeful way. Final comments are provided by a knowledgeable other who also attended the research lesson. This knowledgeable other might ideally be a different person from the person who contributed to the planning phase. This helps to provide the team with a range of perspectives. The final commentator supports the planning team to move beyond where they might be able to go otherwise. The planning team summarise what they have learnt and what their next steps are. The learning is shared more widely, so this might be with other teachers from within a school. It might be in the form of a meeting, a blog post, a newsletter, or a poster. The learning might be shared more widely with the other schools within your associated school group, or even wider than that, it might be shared at a conference. Some schools in Highland have shared their learning at the Scottish Mathematical Council conference. The learning and next steps then feed into the next lesson study cycle. Finally, as well as exploring what lesson study is, it's important to consider what lesson study is not. It's not a performance management tool. Remember, the purpose of lesson study is to gain new knowledge for teaching and learning. Teachers should feel comfortable investigating things that they find challenging and be willing to take risks in relation to testing out ideas to evaluate the impact. Observing the research lesson for performance management purposes undermines this purpose. Lesson study is not a short-term intervention. It becomes part of the long-term normal operating procedures of the school. In some schools in Highland, the school-wide research theme feeds into the school's school improvement plan, and time to engage in lesson study is prioritised and protected by including it as part of the working time agreement. It's important to remember as well that the depth that is gone into for the research lesson is not intended to be what is expected for day-to-day general planning of lessons. This is professional development serving a very specific purpose. However, using it in the long term has the potential to make day-to-day planning more efficient and more effective for pupil learning.